Submarines carry enough food and fuel for months underwater, but oxygen? They bring almost none. 0 tanks. So how are 140 sailors still breathing after 90 days sealed in a metal tube? The answer broke my understanding of chemistry completely. 500 feet underwater, there's no cracking a window for fresh air. No running to the store for an oxygen tank. You're sealed inside a metal tube with 150 other people, and every single breath depends on a machine most folks have never heard of. It's called an electrolyzer. And honestly, it's basically a fancy water splitter. Here's how it works. You pump purified seawater through the machine, hit it with a massive jolt of electricity, and boom, the H2O molecules break apart. Hydrogen floats one direction. Oxygen goes the other. Simple chemistry, really. Your high school science teacher would be proud. The oxygen gets pumped straight into the submarine's ventilation system. Fresh, breathable air manufactured on demand hundreds of feet below the ocean surface. The hydrogen? That stuff's dangerous. One spark, and you've got yourself a very bad day. So it gets vented overboard immediately. No exceptions. Now here's where it gets impressive. A single electrolysis unit produces enough oxygen for 150 crew members breathing normally. Not for hours, not for days, for months. We're talking about 40 gallons of breathable oxygen every single hour, running 24/7. But there's a catch. Always is, right? You can't just pump regular ocean water through this thing. Seawater contains salt, minerals, and microscopic gunk that would destroy the equipment within days. So submarines run their own water purification systems first. Clean water goes in. Life-sustaining oxygen comes out. Makes sense so far? Good. Because here's where my paranoid side kicks in. What happens when the main system fails because machinery breaks? That's just physics being rude. Submarines carry backup oxygen candles. These aren't your romantic dinner candles. They're chemical compounds that burn at controlled temperatures, releasing pure oxygen as they combust. Each candle provides enough air for several crew members for about an hour. It's like having a fire extinguisher, except instead of putting out flames, you're literally burning something to stay alive. The irony isn't lost on submariners, but creating oxygen is only half the battle, because every breath you take creates a silent killer building up around you, so you're making oxygen. Great. But here's the problem nobody thinks about. Every single breath you exhale is slowly poisoning the air around you. Carbon dioxide builds up fast, really fast. In a sealed submarine with 150 people breathing, the air becomes deadly in less than 24 hours. That's not an exaggeration. That's just math. Your body pumps out about 200 milliliters of CO2 every single minute. Multiply that by 150 sailors. Now multiply that by 60 minutes, then by 24 hours. You're looking at over 43,000 liters of poison gas flooding a space smaller than your local grocery store. And the weird part is, you wouldn't even know it's happening. Carbon dioxide doesn't smell. It doesn't taste like anything. You just get a headache, then confusion, then you fall asleep and never wake up. Pleasant stuff, right? So submarines use these things called lithium hydroxide canisters. Think of them like those little silica gel packets that come in your shoe boxes, except instead of absorbing moisture, they're grabbing CO2 molecules out of the air. The chemical reaction literally traps the carbon dioxide inside the canister permanently. But here's the catch. Each canister only works for about 12 hours before it's completely full. Done. Useless. Sailors swap them out constantly, like changing batteries in a smoke detector that actually matters. Then there's the monitoring system. This thing checks the air every few seconds. Oxygen levels, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, hydrogen. It's more paranoid than my mother checking if I locked the front door. The standards are insane too. Submarines keep CO2 below 0.5% and oxygen at exactly 21%. That's stricter than most hospital operating rooms. Your surgeon might be breathing worse air than a guy loading torpedoes. Oh, and fun fact, the Navy banned smoking on submarines in 2010. Not because of cancer concerns, because cigarette smoke was literally overwhelming the air purification systems. The scrubbers couldn't keep up with both human breath and Marlboro Reds, but removing poison from the air requires massive amounts of electricity. Where does all that power come from when you're 500 feet underwater? Here's the thing about everything I just described. The electrolysis machines, the CO2 scrubbers, the water purifiers, they all need one thing to work: power, massive amounts of it. And not just any power, you need electricity that runs nonstop for months without refueling, resurfacing, or plugging into anything. Try doing that with diesel engines. Spoiler alert, you can't. Diesel submarines existed for decades before nuclear tech came along. They worked fine, mostly. But here's their dirty little secret. Diesel engines need air to burn fuel. No air, no engine. So those old subs had to surface every few days just to breathe. Kind of defeats the purpose of hiding underwater, right? Then nuclear reactors changed everything. A nuclear submarine generates enough electricity to power a small town. We're talking roughly 15,000 homes worth of juice, all while sitting 500 feet below the ocean surface where nobody can see you. The reactor heats water into steam. That steam spins massive turbines, and boom, electricity flows to every system on board. The craziest part? Modern nuclear subs carry enough uranium fuel to travel 400,000 miles before needing a refill. That's the distance to the moon and back. Your car gets what, maybe 400 miles per tank? And the weird part is, nuclear submarines could theoretically stay submerged for 25 years straight. The reactor doesn't care. It just keeps humming along, splitting atoms, generating heat, making power. 25 years of continuous underwater operation. My phone can't even last 25 hours without dying. So why don't submarines actually stay down for decades? Food, that's it. Not oxygen, not power, not CO2 buildup, just sandwiches. The crew eventually runs out of things to eat. The Navy figured out how to split water molecules, scrub poison from the air, and harness nuclear fission in a metal tube. But they still can't solve the sandwich problem. This technology transforms submarines from short-range ambush weapons into mobile underwater cities, ships that cross entire oceans without ever breaking the surface. Complete invisibility. But unlimited power creates another challenge. All those people breathing, eating, and living together for 90 days straight, they still need to stay clean. Fresh water on a submarine is more valuable than gold. And I'm not exaggerating. Here's why. Making drinking water means boiling seawater and collecting the steam. That process eats up reactor power, power that could go toward, keeping everyone alive. So showers, they're timed like Olympic events. 30 seconds to get wet, water off, 2 minutes to soap up everything, and I mean everything. Then 30 seconds to rinse. That's your entire shower. 3 minutes total if you're lucky. Miss your time slot? Too bad. 130 sailors share maybe 6 shower stalls. The schedule is tighter than airline seating, and nobody's getting an upgrade. But here's where it gets interesting. Some modern submarines actually recycle that shower water. It goes through filtration systems, gets purified, and comes back out the tap. You're essentially drinking what your buddy showered in yesterday. Appetizing, right? Laundry creates its own problems. Most sailors pack only 7 uniforms for a 90-day patrol. 7 outfits. 3 months? You do the math. Those washing machines run around the clock, but everything still gets reworn way more than your mother would approve of. And deodorant? It becomes actual currency down there. Guys trade it like baseball cards. Skip your hygiene routine once, and your bunkmates will let you know. Loudly. Peer pressure works better than any Navy regulation when you're all breathing the same recycled air. The weird part is how fast you adapt. After 2 weeks, a 3-minute shower feels luxurious. After a month, you stop thinking about long, hot baths entirely. Your brain just accepts that this is life now. I've talked to guys who said the hardest adjustment wasn't the short showers. It was coming home and standing under running water for 20 minutes, feeling guilty the whole time. Makes sense, right? 90 days of conservation rewires how you think about basic resources. Now, staying clean is one challenge, but here's something nobody prepares you for. Sleeping in a space smaller than a coffin, sharing it with strangers, while machinery screams through metal walls 6 feet away. That's a whole different survival skill. Now here's where submarine life gets really personal. Your bed. They call them racks, but coffin is more accurate. 6 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, 2 feet of headroom. I've seen luggage compartments on buses with more space. You can't sit up. You can barely roll over. And this tiny metal box becomes your only private real estate for 90 days. But wait, that assumes you actually own your rack. Junior sailors don't get that luxury. They hot rack. 3 guys share one bed by sleeping in shifts. You crawl into sheets still warm from the last guy, still has his smell, maybe a little damp. Romantic, right? It's like a really terrible Airbnb that never changes hosts. And forget about knowing what time it is. No windows, no sunlight. Your body has zero clues. The only way you know morning from midnight is when the galley serves breakfast versus dinner. Miss a meal? Good luck figuring out if you slept 4 hours or 14. Then there's the noise situation. Sound travels through metal like gossip through a small town. One snorer in a berthing compartment of 20 guys? Nobody sleeps. I'm talking chainsaw-level rumbling bouncing off steel walls. Submariners have literally ranked bunkmates by decibel levels. Some guys become legends for the wrong reasons. The most coveted racks sit far from machinery and foot traffic. These prime spots go to senior sailors who earned them through years of service. New guys, you're sleeping next to the air compressor that kicks on every 40 minutes. Sweet dreams. Here's the brutal truth. Submariners average 4 to 6 hours of sleep daily. That's less than any other military branch. Less than medical residents. Less than new parents with colicky twins. Your shift ends. You're exhausted. You climb into your warm, cramped, borrowed coffin. The guy above you is snoring. Someone's walking past every 3 minutes. The ship makes noises you've never heard before. And somehow, you adapt. The human body is weirdly resilient. But sleep deprivation does something interesting to your appetite. Which brings us to the one thing that actually keeps submarine crews from losing their minds completely. Now here's something that surprised me when I first learned about submarine life. The cooks? They're basically celebrities down there. Seriously, these guys have more influence on crew morale than the captain does on most days. When you're stuck in a metal tube for 3 months, meals become the highlight of your existence. The first 2 weeks are glorious. Fresh apples, crispy lettuce, actual bananas that haven't turned into brown mush. Sailors describe those early days like a cruise ship buffet. Then week 3 hits, and suddenly everything comes from a can or a freezer. But here's what makes submarine dining different from your average military chow hall. The Navy spends around $15 per sailor per meal. That's more than any other branch. Why? Because when you can't see sunlight, can't call your family, and can't walk outside, food becomes your entire social calendar. The logistics are absolutely bonkers. A 90-day patrol requires roughly 60,000 pounds of food. That's 30 tons of groceries crammed into a vessel where space is already tighter than my jeans after Thanksgiving. And where does it all go? Everywhere. Under floor panels, behind equipment, stacked in hallways so high you're literally walking on canned corn for the first month. Here's a tradition that'll make you jealous. Sunday brunch features steak and lobster tail. I'm not joking. These guys are 500 feet underwater, eating better than most of us do at anniversary dinners. This ritual dates back decades because Navy leadership figured out something smart. Give people something to look forward to, and they'll push through another week. The meal schedule also serves another sneaky purpose. Remember how there's no natural light down there? Your body has zero idea what time it is. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner become your only anchors to reality. Miss a meal, and you might genuinely forget what day it is. So the food situation sounds pretty manageable, right? Fresh stuff runs out, frozen takes over, but at least you're eating well. But what about everything else that keeps humans sane? Exercise, entertainment, mental health, that's where things get genuinely creative. So you're stuck in a metal tube for 3 months. No sunlight, no fresh air, no escape. How do you not lose your mind? Well, first you exercise, and by gym, I mean a corner. Literally a corner with maybe 2 stationary bikes and a rowing machine that's older than most of the crew. That's it. That's the whole fitness center. But here's where submariners get creative. They do push-ups between torpedo tubes. They run in place in hallways. Some guys make weights out of chains and spare equipment parts. I've heard stories of sailors bench pressing each other. When you're desperate, you improvise. The real challenge, though, it's not physical. It's mental. Think about it. No windows, no phone calls home, no scrolling social media at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. Complete disconnection from everything you know. And the weird part is, most submariners say the isolation bothers them less than you'd expect. The constant work helps. There's always something breaking, always a watch to stand, always a drill to run. Boredom is actually rare. Entertainment exists, but it's vintage. We're talking thousands of DVDs, video game consoles that would make your teenager laugh, A small library of paperbacks that have been passed around so many times, the pages feel like tissue paper. Email does exist, but calling it email is generous. Messages get reviewed for security, limited to about 100 words, and only transmitted during brief communication windows. Want to tell your wife you love her? Better be concise. Now let's talk about something the Navy doesn't advertise. The psychological screening process is intense. Not everyone can handle this environment. Before deployment, every sailor goes through mandatory evaluations. They're looking for warning signs, anxiety, claustrophobia, inability to handle conflict in tight spaces. Because here's the reality. If someone breaks down at 500 feet, there's no calling a helicopter, no evacuating to a hospital. You're stuck together. The Navy pays submariners up to $600 extra monthly. That bonus exists specifically because of how mentally demanding this life is. But mental stress is one thing. What happens when the submarine itself starts breaking apart? That's when training becomes survival. Here's the thing about being 500 feet underwater. You can't exactly call AAA. Every single person on that submarine trains for disaster. Doesn't matter if you're the cook or the torpedo technician. When something breaks at crush depth, everyone becomes a damage control specialist. Fast. And what's the biggest killer down there? Not flooding, not pressure, fire. Seems backwards, right? You're surrounded by ocean, yet fire is your worst nightmare. The problem is simple. Smoke has nowhere to go. Flames eat through your oxygen supply like my uncle eats through a buffet. One small electrical fire can turn fatal in minutes because the atmosphere you've been carefully maintaining becomes poison. But here's where submarine engineering gets clever. Emergency blow systems can launch a submarine from 500 feet to the surface in under 60 seconds. That's like an elevator ride from hell, except the elevator weighs 6,000 tons. The system floods ballast tanks with high-pressure air, and the sub basically becomes a cork shooting toward daylight. Flooding happens differently. Watertight doors seal off every compartment. If one section floods, the crew seals it. Cold as that sounds, sacrificing one compartment saves the entire boat. I've talked to submariners who've practiced these drills until they could do them blindfolded, which is good because sometimes they have to. And the weird part is, those weekly disaster drills include fighting fires in complete darkness. Total blackout, smoke fills the compartment. You're working entirely by touch, memory, and training. Now let's talk about the nightmare scenario. The submarine is disabled, can't move, can't surface normally. Emergency reserves kick in, enough oxygen and food to survive 7 to 10 days while waiting for rescue. That might sound reassuring until you remember you're sitting in a metal tube at the bottom of the ocean, hoping someone finds you before supplies run out. The Navy actually has rescue submarines specifically designed to dock with disabled boats and extract crew members. They've used the system exactly once in actual combat conditions. Hopefully they never need it again, but every submariner sleeps better knowing it exists. Speaking of things that help you sleep,